Sometimes a nation's descent into moral depravity is marked by a sudden event, a coup, for instance. Other times the signposts are smaller, subtler increments, such as the third story on our countdown tonight. CTV in Canada has obtained a list the Canadian government has given to its diplomats, instructing them how to deal with Canadian prisoners in countries that use torture. Countries, the list says, that include Syria, Iran, and the United States of America. The list was generated after the U.S. seized the Canadian Maher Arar in New York in 2002 and sent him to Syria, where he was tortured for a year based on false information. Also in 2002, a 15-year-old Canadian, Omar Khadr, was taken to Guantanamo Bay, which is also included in the Canadian torture list. His lawyers say he, too, has been tortured, something the U.S. denies. Putting aside the fact America has held a teenager captive without trial and that no country has held anyone younger than 18 responsible for war crimes ever before, still, we are left to confront the fact that we now live in a world where diplomats are instructed in how to detect whether their citizens in our custody have been tortured, specifically subjected to forced nudity, isolation, and sleep deprivation, among other things. Diplomats from Canada. Let's turn now to Charles Swift, formerly of the Navy's JAG Corps, where he served as defense counsel in the landmark U.S. versus Hamdan case. Commander Swift, once again, thanks for some of your time tonight.
Thank you for having me, Keith.
What's the significance of this list, especially given that it is Canada's list, and especially if other countries follow suit in creating lists of their own like this with us on it?
The biggest significance right now is it's visible evidence of something that former Secretary of State Colin Powell had warned of, the current Secretary of State has warned of, the Secretary of Defense has warned of, that Guantanamo Bay and our interrogation practices are making it hard for them to do their jobs. When they go into a diplomatic meeting, they have to deal with this. It becomes the first thing on the agenda, and it starts to jeopardize cooperation in intelligence gathering, police work, and ultimately potentially extradition and other issues. So what it is it's showing the visible evidence that what Colin Powell told the country when he said we need to close Guantanamo Bay today is accurate, because if Canada is putting us on the list, one of our closest allies with whom we've always shared a common heritage, we're in trouble diplomatically, and they're not kidding around, and the longer we persist, the worse things get.
The U.S., obviously, the administration has denied torturing Omar Khadr or anybody else. You have an answer to this question? Why don't those denials hold any water with the Canadians?
Well, in the world community, it's starting to become like Iran denying that they have a nuclear weapons program. The question always is, well, let us inspect it. Let us take a look at it. The country replies, no, that's national security. We're not going to do that. And people become suspect. Plus, we have reports that are credible, that waterboarding, that forced nudity, and prolonged isolation are what we're doing. And while we may parse this legally, they're not parsing it legally in Europe, they're not parsing it legally in Canada, and they're not parsing it legally in Great Britain and our other allies. They call it for what it is, torture. And this debate, which for us seems to continue politically in Congress, is over in Europe. And it's over in Canada. We're losing it there. It's done.
Commander, in case anybody hasn't gotten the message yet, morality aside, purely on the basis of effectiveness, why shouldn't the U.S. use torture in interrogations?
Well, two reasons. One, it doesn't work. For all those who say, well, I got information, you have no idea as to its credibility. You forced the information out. You have no idea whether it was true or not. Number two is when you use these tactics, you lose your friends. And friends are what's absolutely essential in combating a problem like terrorism. The United States does not want to be the only nation left with combating terrorism and be on the outside. We have to have our friends. And Canada is one of our closest. You know, the Millennium Bomber came from Canada. We share a common border. We need cooperation. These two, it's a common problem that we have to work together on. And if they're placed in a position where politically Canada cannot work with us, we're in much more danger than we were before.
This week we heard from Congress that the CIA's clandestine operation director, Jose Rodriguez, had been told, don't destroy the Bangkok station chief's tapes, in which two of the suspected al-Qaeda members, including Abu Zubaydah, were subjected to waterboarding. Rodriguez denies that claim. All of this reportedly, at least in part, to prevent the world from actually seeing Americans torturing captive men. Does destroying our tapes mitigate how we're seen overseas, or does it push us further into the realm of the rogue nation status?
I think it pushes us farther into the realm. This is a case where the crime is worse than the cover-up, but in the world's part, we're not going to regain credibility. And I think the timing of that was this particular species when one gets down to Guantanamo and the trials. The tapes were destroyed weeks after the D.C. Circuit cleared commissions to restart. Now, the Supreme Court took the case and stopped the commissions eventually, but there was real concern in the CIA that the tapes would eventually be shown down in the commissions and be ruled as torture. So one of the problems that continues through this whole part is that we can't come clean. And as long as we can't come clean, the worst will be thought of us.
Charles Swift, former lieutenant commander in the Navy, now law professor at Emory University. Professor, great thanks for your time again.
Thank you.